Now, as I showed you the index function, you notice that it was two-dimensional. We put in both the number of rows and the number of columns, and we kept track of what item we wanted to pull out. In that example, we dealt with a two-dimensional array. We're going to get there in a minute, but we're going to start out with just a one-dimensional horizontal array, then go to a vertical array, and then finally get to that two-dimensional array. So let's start out with our horizontal array. And what we're going to do is take a horizontal amount of data and basically try to access those different elements. All right, so let's go into our VBA code, and we'll see exactly how we start to build this function. So you'll notice right away that I have the option explicit command at the top. That's going to force me again to initiate any of the variables I'm going to use in my code. So that's always a good thing to start with. You want to start with that option explicit. So now let's create our function. Let's call it, not dim, we're going to do function, and we'll say horizontal array. And what do we want back from our horizontal array? Well, we'd like it to tell us kind of an element of the array we've built, just like the index function does. So let's say here that we want the column number as an integer. We can use integer here because we know it has to be evenly spaced integers that keep track of, or whole numbers that keep track of the positions within these arrays. So we have our function written. I'll just start out by putting our horizontal array, and we'll just put equals to 1, just as a holding position. That way we make sure we get this name of the variable right there and there, that those are the same things. All right, now what I'm going to do to start out is I'm going to create an array that's going to be empty, and we're going to populate that array with a for loop. So that initial empty array, we're just going to call as number array, and we're going to initiate it fairly specially. All right. So notice that we did a dim command, much like we've done in the past, but we put this parentheses 1, 5 close parentheses behind it. So what that's doing, it's creating an array that is 1 column tall and then 1 row tall, 1 row, 5 columns wide. All right. And this is again where that RC, row and then column, comes in. So we've created our number array. It's going to have essentially 1 row of 5 different slots for data to go in. All right, so that's how big our array is. Basically, we've taken our locker and we've made it have 5 different subdivided pieces arranged to where you have them kind of horizontally structured. All right, so that is our number array. The second variable we want to create is our looping variable. So I'm going to create dim loop number as integer as well. Now we're ready to go ahead and use our for loop to build up that array. So let's do for loop number equals 1 to 5. Here we're only going to do it a set number of times. We know exactly that we want to go from 1 to 5 times. We're going to worry about making that dynamic in future videos. All right, so we're setting up our loop initially. We have our next loop number. And now what are we going to do inside of our loop? Well, inside of our loop, we want to basically populate that number array variable or array. So we're going to say that number array 1, loop number. All right, now here's where it gets kind of interesting, and now we have to think a little bit harder conceptually about what's going on. So when I say number array 1, loop number, you want to think that each time through this loop, loop number is going to change. Right? The first time through, it's going to take a value of 1. The second time through, it's going to take a value of 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. And so what we're going to be cycling through is kind of the first slot of the array, the second slot of the array, the third, the fourth, and then the fifth slot of the array. Now what do we want to put in there? Let's just put in there exactly what the loop number is. So we're essentially going to put 1 in the first slot, 2 in the second slot, then 3, then 4, then 5, in those third, fourth, and fifth slots. All right, so that's what we're going to be doing to populate this array as we go. Now, it's nice to be able to see that this is working. So here we want to use our debug.print, and we're going to print out the number array 1, loop number. So in this case, we're building that 1, loop number in there. That way we can see just the element of the array that we're interested in. If we ask VBA to give us back the full array, it doesn't really know how to do that. It can give us kind of one thing back at a time. So we have to tell it exactly what position in the array to go pull from to give us that item back. All right. The last thing that we need to do is give back to the user the position of the array that they were interested in. So finally, we can go to our number array. It's all in the first row, so we're always starting with 1 comma. And then which column do we want? Well, that'll be the column number of what the user provided to us. So let's jump back over to Excel and see how this works. So we come over to our Excel function, and we type horizontal array. And let's say we want the second position. And if you remember, the second position should hold the number 2. Let's see if that's true. There we get the number 2. If we change this to a 5, we should get the 5th position of the array. We get the number 5. All right, let's distinguish a little bit exactly what's going on with a slightly different example. So let's go back to our code. And when we get back here, let's change how we're populating the array. So rather than doing the loop number itself, let's do the loop number times 2. Or even better, let's do the loop number times 10. That way it's kind of scaling everything up, and we can easily see that we should have 10 in the first spot, then 20, 30, 40, and 50. So now if we go back, we should see those numbers in our first, second, third, fourth, and fifth position, not just the number 10. So let's flip back over. If we put in 1, we should get 10, and that's what we get. If we flip that over, let's try 3, we should get 30, and we still get that 30, which is the value that's in the third position of the array. Now, what if we want to see the entire array all at once? Well, we know we can't see it in just one cell, but we could see it over a number of cells, right? We have a 1 row by 5 column array. We could see it in 1 row by 5 columns of cells. So if we set this up properly, let's just index it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What we can do is we could use our horizontal array and call that index position or that input parameter as our variable. So if we use 10, we can see that that works. And now if we copy that all the way across, we can see the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, all the different elements of that array by copying the function across and getting each of those different index items out. Now in the next video, we're actually going to look at doing this in a vertical perspective rather than from a horizontal perspective.